Hey, all right, we're back. Thanks for joining us today on this session. We're talking about Alien in the Alien series. So, we have here on the first lineup, we have Alien, the original release. Right? So here we're looking at the egg. It's an egg. Take a look here. Right? So which came first? Chicken or the egg? This is a looming debate that's been around some time, and it's been answered and unanswered and answered again. It's lively. It maintains. It persists through lore or just through repetition. But in continuous Alien. So we have this, we have the Great, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that shortly. Okay, but moving along, we're just going to do a quick summation of all the original release posters and media. Alright, so the next one we have is Aliens. Right? Here you have aliens. You see that a lot of eggs. Right? And then you have the woman and child. Principle of woman and child. Mother and child. Right? Two women. Or female. Concept of childbirth, as we recall, is a principal element of this particular session. Or throughout the whole series, rather. And in this particular movie, the queen was pretty much fostering the growth of the eggs that never move, that would never ever do anything. They would have never hatched if it were not them being able to come into with a oxygen producing creature to inhabit it. And there is no life forms there, recall, right? So they're a select derived life force. There was no other life forms there because this was an artificial environment. This is on site of a oil tanker or a carbon producing tanker plant, right? It was production. Let's take a look at it now here. We're going to take a look at this initial. We're going to take a look at this initial release, and we'll take note of the type of vessel that this was. So, remotely, how it came to be there. And as we look back at the original storyline, we'll be able to derive the idea of the transition between Alien and Aliens. All right, so the next thing is Alien 3. And here you have the embryo, the concept of a structural imprint, genetic. It's all related to the genetic concept, right? And it's the Trinity, and it's Alien 3. 3 times the suspense, 3 times the danger, 3 times the terror. So you notice this on the embryo, the embryonic stage, right, of the transitory concept. And then one main thing of Alien was the concept of how the Xenomorph transitions and its transition phases, right? So a full size starting from the onset and then grow, a face hugger, a chest burster, all the different stages. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. All right, so stay tuned. We're going to take a break and we'll be back shortly.
From the Alien Earth premiere trailers, first contact confirmed. 5 new species touched down, rewriting the biosphere. Reports show rapid cellular adaptation and potential classification as invasive apex organisms. We're diving into the xenobiology of it all, novel traits, ecological disruption, and synthetic lineage clues. Curious minds are invited. Explore beyond the landing zones, We'll journey through the cinematic evolution of extraterrestrials, from silver suits to acid blood, from 50s radio dramas to transdimensional horrors. Alien mythology on screen has shaped how we fear, hope, and imagine. This is Xenomorph Channel, your surveillance watch group for interstellar arrivals, cinema cryptids, and biological subtext. Follow for updates, analysis, and trailer deep dives. Stay tuned. Truth leaks, one spore at a time.
Again, thanks for joining us. We're back. We're talking about Alien and the Alien franchise. One of the best ever. It's a favorite of mine. Alright, so here, we always talk about the basic principle. I want to make sure we always elaborate on that. Is the concept of the evolutionary debate and the transition of species across certain lines. You have, what's called the fossil record, right? And the fossil record is able to, give reference and credence to different types of species that were prevalent at certain key points in times throughout the growth across the crust and the mantle, or rather the crust, lithospheric crust of the times. All right, so, and that relates to the evolutionary debate, right? All these movies that are current cycling in the system right now, that are around these genres and fields relate to that, and we can tie those in and give you reference to that. All right, so the next thing is Alien Resurrection. As we talked about Alien 3 and special lines and different stages of growth, here in Alien Resurrection, we talk about the resurrection. And we know what happened with Ripley in Alien 3, right? So Alien Resurrection was about that, and it was all about genetics being able to slice, and splice, right? And so as we look at the poster here, we're going to take a little bit more detail, and let's do that now. This particular movie is significant as a big part of the era, as you can see here. Let's take a look at a cross-reference across some of the other movie franchises. All right, we have like the One, we have X-Men, we have, as you see here, Romulus, the linear, vertical, right, horizontal gene transfer. So this is referencing these concepts: horizontal gene transfer, splicing, right, the entry and exit, how things enter and exit and begin. And we talked about the concept of the glass and the initial onset of the entry point. We're going to take a look at that again. So here in Romulus, let's take a look at Romulus. The face hugger, of course. The surface, there at the surface, that's where oxygen needs to occur, at that surface. So there's an interface there. So the interface, they interface with the body, right? So you have an interface, which is a control center. So they take control of that interface. And then the interface being the oxygenic concept. And this is where somehow, if you look at the concept of how humans take in oxygen and what they're doing, right? They use the extender from their body, right, to go inside of the throat, right? So they inducing suffocation, but they're able to maintain them, right? So that's the concept of a mask, and a mask being able to have certain types of features to sustain you, right? And then, so of course, the depositor, and then the transition to the chest burster, the transition into the human form, and then back out. And this is how they acquire bipedalism. right? All these features, and there are other elements, and we'll talk about that in detail, all right? So we're going to take a break for a moment, and we'll be back shortly. All right, we're back. We're talking about the Alien series, all right? We're glad to have y'all with us. All right, so the next thing, we're talking about Alien Covenant and what the covenant meant, right? Between human and alien, right? The concept of that transition, where it originates from, all right? Because we talked about the transition of the life forms through the cycles of the Xenomorph, and it all origins and originates with the human. And we talked about in Prometheus, we talked about their origin and their connection, right? Was there a connection? Some people put connections to their initial stage, but it all originated from humans, because as you notice, the whole movie of Prometheus was that their DNA was an exact match, right? But look at their structural features here. We'll talk about that shortly. All right, thanks for joining us. We're going to take a break.
Welcome to Xenomorph Channel, your eyes in the void, your ears beneath the spores. This week, the alien Earth premiere dropped with seismic impact. 5 alien species confirmed landing zones across Earth's biomes. Adaptation rates off the charts. Cellular reconstruction noted in under 72 hours. Humanity's biosphere isn't just changing, it's being rewritten. And the apex arrival? One xenomorph, classified specimen XA-47, now walks Earth. We'll see. This isn't just premiere coverage. It's planetary journalism. It's species diplomacy. Here on Xenomorph Channel, we decode alien anatomy, challenge biotech ethics, and host the first public archive of interspecies memory. From film mythology to living cryptids, this is your survival manual. As entertainment. Subscribe. Archive. Stay vigilant. We're not just watching them, they're watching us.
All right, covenant. So we were talking about covenant. It was the pact or the connection between the species. As you recall, when the first movie, when the young alien was born, right? And she had the conflict with the queen, and she was sucked through the vacuum of the window, right? Through the decompressurizing of that compartment due to the acidic blood from what Ripley became. All right, so we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. Let's take a few shots of the footage. All right, let's take a couple of quick views of the footage, and we'll elaborate it on in detail. All right, stay tuned. Okay, we have this version of the trailer. It starts off with a screen. It's all about the screen, right? And being at the screen. This is how reality is interpreted. Okay, so here, entry point. Shield, trying to get in or out. Trying to get in or out.
Different life forms.
Trying to get in or out.
Of the universe. Each one a unique
barriers.
Monsters.
Whatever comes, we'll face it together.
When the monsters come, all you can do is breathe.
You see the formation of the hands, the fingers? We're going to elaborate on that because in Romulus, that was a significant factor, and we'll give reference to that shortly. Okay, so here we have this version, which we talked about cellular agglutination. We talked about the concept of formation and biological processes and the development of a new species, right, to adapt, to be able to adapt in any environment. And it having blood for acids. These are all some of the earlier things that were referenced, right, on its formation. So being a synthetic-based creature, it's biology, right? So we're going to talk a little bit more about that on the xenobiological approach to analyses of alien species. So we're going to take a look from a xenobiologist's perspective on alien species. And we're going to apply the principles, right, in a medical application using these principles of xenobiology. See the formation of the hands, right? Embryonic, you see the embryonic phase, the unfolding. So it all relates to the unfolding, right? And the genome being genetic folding.
I looked in a biochemistry textbook and I saw a drawing of something called a bacterial flagellum with all of its parts in all of its glory. It's had a propeller and the hook region and the drive shaft and the motor and so on. I looked at that and I said, that's an outboard motor. That's designed. That's no chance assemblage of parts.
Behe's reaction was not surprising. For the molecular motors that drive bacteria through liquid each depend upon a system of intricately arranged mechanical parts. These parts come into focus when portions of a cell are magnified 50,000 times. Biochemists have used electron micrographs like this one to identify the parts and three-dimensional structure of the flagellar motor. In the process, they have revealed a marvel of engineering on a miniaturized scale.
Harrisburg at Harvard has labeled it the most efficient machine in the universe. These machines, some of them are running at 100,000 RPM and are hardwired into a signal transduction or sensory mechanism so that it's getting feedback from the environment.
And even though they're spinning that fast, they can stop on a dime. It only takes a quarter turn for them to stop and shift directions and start spinning 100,000 RPM in the other direction.
And just like outboard motors on motorboats, it has a large number of parts which are necessary for the motor to work.
The bacterial flagellum, 2 gears, forward and reverse, water-cooled, proton-motive force. It has a stator, it has a rotor, it has a U-joint, it has a drive shaft, it has a propeller, and they function as these parts of machines. It's not convenient that we give them these names. That's truly their function.
Since its discovery, scientists have tried to understand how a rotary motor could have arisen through natural selection. As yet, they have failed to offer any detailed Darwinian explanation. To see why, we must understand a feature of molecular machines known as irreducible complexity.
Irreducible complexity was coined by Mike Behe in describing these molecular machines. Basically what it says is that you have multi-component parts to any given organelle or system in a cell, all of which are necessary for function. That is, if you remove one part, you lose function of that system.
The idea of irreducible complexity can be illustrated by a familiar, non-biological machine, a mousetrap. The trap is composed of 5 basic pieces: a catch to hold the bait, a strong spring, a thin bent rod called the hammer, a holding bar to secure the hammer in place, and a platform upon which the entire system is mounted. If any one of these parts is missing or defective, the mechanism will not work. All components of this irreducibly complex system must be present simultaneously for the machine to perform its function, catching mice. Irreducible complexity also applies to biological machines, including the bacterial flagellar motor.
All told, there are about 40 different protein parts which are necessary for this machine to work. And if any of those parts are missing, then either you get a flagellum that doesn't work because it's missing the hook or it's missing the drive shaft or whatever, or it doesn't even get built within the cell.
In evolutionary terms, you have to be able to explain how you can build this system gradually when there's no function until you have all those parts in place.
The irreducible complexity of molecular machines poses a severe challenge to the power of natural selection. According to Darwin's theory, even very complex biological structures like an eye, an ear, or a heart can be built gradually over time in small incremental steps. Yet, as Darwin made clear, natural selection can only succeed if these random genetic changes provide some advantage to the evolving organism in its struggle for survival.
Though ultimately the flying species gestated was due to heat and moisture from the fuselage and interior temperature. Gyroscopic orientation due to it being on a crash course and the gestation was rapidly occurring.
To any given organelle or system in a cell, all of which are necessary for function.
Form follows function. Our focus on the Xenomorphology channel. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Function as part of a system of a computer-generated world, like the Matrix or Tron, slated to be released at the end of 2025. Stay tuned for an in-depth review of these movies on the Xenomorph channel.
Mother Earth,
is expecting.
Okay, we're back. We're doing a review of the new Hulu series, Alien Earth.
Mother Earth
So as you see in this first trailer,
is expecting.
they say Mother Earth is expecting. You see the reflection of the Earth and the shape and reflection of the Xenomorph. Notice the screen variations, the glitch, the eye looks like a cow. The faces, all within the screen and the glitch concept. Then we notice here we have the ending of the trailer, and it has this lighted crack or opening or representing the Earth, and you know the other picture or image which we'll take a look at represents the embryonic stage of development of a special line. So what this appears to me is the concept of the egg. It goes back to the initial concept of the egg and how, you know, the egg, which came first, you know, the egg or the chicken or what have you, or the idea of that concept of the principle of origination. And then secondly, the concept of the egg itself, the egg being a surface, correct? It's a surface that's containing the embryonic component of that's developing. So the interplay between the surface of the Earth encasing the liquid environment of the planet, right? And within that planet is the embryonic stage, and then they reference that here in these images. But what I want to emphasize here is also that within this communication there's multiple other things going on. As we've detailed in other facets of our broadcast, we reference the concept of the universality of imagery and symbols and the alphabet, and we utilize these principles in all of our standards that we employ when we, you know, analyze material or content or what have you. So as we look at this, you see the positioning. So let's take, first thing we want to take a look is the positioning of the Earth and land masses that are visible. So if we take a look at these land masses, it looks like Africa, and it looks like that side of the eastern hemisphere, right? So as we look at Africa, we look at the two places there, and then on the other side, so directly on the other side of that would be South America, and then we look at the equator, where the equator would be located here. So currently here, let's take a look here at the equator, and the idea of what we're referencing here is the moving of the geographic poles, right, and orientation. So orientation relating to the Xenomorph as how they orient themselves, right? So being how they orient themselves and move and motivate themselves without vision, right? So they have a sensing mechanism that's naturally built into their systems, and this was emphasized in one of the AVP series of movies on how it navigates and the principle of how it moves and is able to communicate with the hive mind, autonomous development as a synthetic organism that has a biological basis in its structure. So again, we look at the land masses here. You see Africa, and then you see where the V splits. Just so happens this is occurring on the Earth currently, because there's separation of the land masses and the tectonic plates and the subplates and conduction zones, etc., all that type of things in the geological and landmass and atmospheric and oceanography fields that reference this. So let's take a look at the information here, and we'll review the maps and the global reference. So when we talk about the concept of the Xenomorph here and the reflection, another principle we talked about was the concept of the evolutionary debate. And the evolutionary debate seems to reign throughout most of the movies that are promoted and presented to the general populace nowadays. So we can verify this in many ways, which we'll do in successive sessions. But generally, as we take a look at this image here, it looks like it's positioned sort of near Africa. As you can see, the land masses, the Mediterranean mass here, in this component here. And you can see part of the top of the globe. So orientation, I referenced before. And as we see this reflection image here, there's been talks about how positioning in space and the orientation of space and what actually is space. So, a big element of what Alien emphasized was the concept of there's no sound in space and no oxygen, no sound, and all these things bear relevance to this. So, as we look at this image again, as we see it being reflected, there's many principles that have been expressed in this presentation. And alien being the concept of our origin, right? Origin myths and where we come from, how this all began, this creation, etc. So when you look at this, it references this and it's showing, because we talk about reflection and imagery and how manifold surfaces and reflective surfaces, right, create the illusion of image and the illusion of depth. And so as we look at this as the contours of this, the head or the carapace of the exoskeletal structure, it reflects different principles that have been utilized and referenced to the cosmos, to how energy and light moves and behaves. So we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. But I just want to reference, take a look here at the imagery that's produced in this reflective surface as it moves across one of the basic tenets of what science holds true to is the concept of Euclidean space and the concept of a flat space. So is the universe flat? Because we could take a look at detail on these ideas at a later time. But for now, we just wanted to reference them. So take a look at this again. All right, so moving on, we're going to take a look at the next scene, next trailer that references Alien Earth. Stay tuned.